Welcome everybody to the 2011 Student Prof debate. So today, the resolution at hand. So I'm going to quote just what Harry wrote because he writes it very, very funny and much better than I can put it. But in many universities, traditional lecture-style classes are being replaced with inquiry-based, experiential learning classes, and tenured teaching positions are decreasing as sessional teachers become more increasingly used. Be it resolved that this, overall, is a good thing. Arguing for, drum roll, we have, with persuasive ability at the micro and macro level, Dr. Will SCARTH. And making sure we're going to keep things this nice and adversarial, SVEN POYSA. Now, that's arguing for. So arguing against, he's a man with a plan to have you over for dinner. And the working girl who will take your old clothes and give you some of Nolan's. So, honored, I guess, attendees, this will be a British parliamentary style debate with a 7-minute opening speech by each side. We're going to decide which side starts by a flip of the coin. So, for the professors, if it's tails, you guys start, and if it's heads, the students start. Are you all ready?
Yeah.
That's tails. So, without further ado, I turn the floor over for 7 minutes to the students, Alex and Daniel. What? No. It's been a long day.
Please give a good
Play with your mind.
Okay.
Okay.
By all means,
Where do we go?
wherever you want.
Okay, so I think the obvious first point to make is that sessionals are cheaper. Right? The starting salary for many tenured profs these days is about $75,000, and they teach 4 courses a year. Sessionals, you can have them for $6,500 per course. So if you give them the 4 courses, you're only up to $26,000. So there's a lot of money left over to do other things with and pursue very useful things from society's point of view. And so I think a common thing that people would like to do with spare revenue is to take it away from the university system altogether and just give it to poor people. And I assume that you people would find that a compelling argument. That's not a helpful point. But now, I guess I suspect my honorable opponents might try and argue that, of course, it would decrease those in poverty by making those transfers away from the university, but it would create another group in poverty, and that would be the professors. I think that's just going too far, because I looked up the minimum wage in Ontario this afternoon. It's $10.25 an hour, and so if you do a 40-hour week times 15 weeks a year, that's $20,500, which is far lower than the $26,000 that I just talked about. In fact, so professors would be a full 26% better off than poor. So I think it's just trying to get at that point is just a non-starter. Now, of course, it might not be possible, I'll admit, to take the money out of the university system to give to the poor or some laudable purpose like that, because it may be that the university will lose some revenue on another front. I mean, this saves some costs, but what happens if they lose some revenue on another front, in particular tuition? After all, when you think of, I've never met a cohort of students who didn't think tuition should be lower than it is. And so one wants to think, why is it that tuition remains high? And I think it's because the university education up until now, at least, has been pretty much, you can think of it as an investment. Right? You take a few years of your life in which you don't earn income while you come to school, and what you're essentially buying is a higher income stream when you get out the other end. And so I think it's pretty hard when most of the benefits of a university education go to the individual who's receiving it. I mean, there are a bit of spillover benefits like when you go to vote, you'd like to think that the other voters can read and so on, but that's what we're talking about at the tertiary level. So I think most of the benefits are private. So when you think of the fact that it's mostly the higher socioeconomic groups who attend university, and what they're getting out of it is this nice income stream for, say, 40 years after they graduate, it's not so obvious that you want to pay the tuition for them. I mean, most investments have an upfront price. And so I think that's the fundamental reason why it's so difficult to convince society in general to get these tuition payments ever lower. But I think if we move all the more toward this inquiry-based approach, then of course it's not so obvious to the employers that people coming out have any well-defined set of skills. I mean, after all they did the whole time is just kind of do what they want. And so then what the issue is that I wouldn't expect, if this trend continued big time, I wouldn't expect people to command such a stream of wages when they come out of university. I mean, there's an age-old controversy within economics about whether university does in fact impart extra knowledge to people. It may just be that you come here smart and we don't destroy that, and then you get out the other end. And so all the university degree is kind of a signal. It saves costs on the part of employers to say, I don't have to really find out what the skills are of this person. They've got this easy to recognize signal, a university degree. And so, but that was because they kind of knew there were all kinds of compulsory courses where particular skills were rammed down your throat. And the more we go to a system where that's not the case, then that signal is lost. And if the signaling interpretation of education is correct, in other words, that university education doesn't impart more knowledge, it's just a very costly signaling system, then the jig will be up when the employers find out that there isn't this well-defined set of skills. And so, in fact, your wage stream that you'll get when you graduate will be much lower. And so that then opens, this is the crux of the argument, that opens the door to get tuition lowered, right? Because then it'll be more compelling for the poor to say, oh yeah, these poor guys aren't getting a higher wage stream, so they shouldn't have to pay for their investment so much on their own through the private tuition payments. So the bottom line is, I mean, it's kind of bad news if you can have this lousy income stream, but it's I mean, what I've found from students over the years is I say that as long as you can say it's going to lower tuition, then that just trumps everything. So I think that's a very telling point as well. So that even if, as I say, the university loses so much private tuition payments that they lose as much on that front as they save on professor salaries, it's still the better idea that because lower tuition is good for the poor. And you will not remember my earlier point that it's the higher socioeconomic groups. 1.5 minutes left. Okay, I'll just try and make one more point now. Yeah, I guess, I mean, would these people, if the only jobs you could get were as professors, were these sessionals, would people still want these jobs? And because after all, it's a much lower rate of pay. But I think that's why I think it was very clever that the motion combines this idea of moving to sessionals and moving to the inquiry-based teaching. Because, of course, in the old style of teaching, when you had to be the sage on the stage, you actually had to prepare lectures and stuff. But when you're just the guy on the side, then you just have to turn up and listen to the students. And so people would still take these jobs. So I don't think, even though we're ramming down the salaries of the professors so much under this new plan, I think people will still take jobs. So there's no real panic there at all. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dr. Scarth. Now we'll have 7-minute opening remarks from the opposition.
Distinguished professor, distinguished almost professor, almost distinguished chair. We've gathered here today to discuss the merits and drawbacks of inquiry-based classes versus lecture-style classes, a matter which I'll defer to my colleague, Mr. CARENS-NEDELSKY, and the issue of sessional versus tenured professors, a matter which I will be handling as candidly as possible while maintaining the appropriate sensitivity. I think it's prudent before we begin, actually, that we address the elephant in the room, and I do think we all know what I'm talking about. Sven is not a professor. He's a sessional professor, Remember, this doesn't make him a bad person. It just makes him a slightly less good person than Dr. Scarth. Let me tell you why. Firstly, I will be putting myself in the position of a brilliant academic. Please use your imagination. Struggling to make it in the big bad university. I am a sessional professor seeking tenure. What does my life look like? I'm researching like crazy. Trying to impress a university board of directors who are judging my every move. I'm dirt poor and teaching sessional courses to pay the bills, which, as Dr. Scarth just proved, is not very effective. I am essentially the naive puppy of the university who's wagging its tail and doing tricks for tenure, and who knows whether I'll ever get it. To illustrate my point more clearly, if the puppy analogy wasn't enough, I will direct you. Does it sound like a particularly intelligent being to you? Because to me it sounds like a person who's a little silly and who apparently has atrocious grammar. Now let me ask you this. If my real motivation were to gain tenure, clearly that means I'm not putting as much energy as I could into teaching my young, attractive, and wonderfully intelligent students. Whether the sessional professor in question is one seeking tenure, such as the poor soul I just described, who may or may not have been based on Dr. Rada. The professor in question is one such as SVEN, who's successful outside the academic world, and just doing this for kicks. The fact of the matter is this is not their full-time occupation or interest. Now you might be thinking, Alex, that seems like a completely unbased claim, but it is not. I assure you skeptics that I have it on good authority from reliable sources who shall remain nameless that it has become habit for David and Sven to come up to 4 minutes late to class. 4 minutes. Dr. Scarth, on the other hand, has been on time or early every time, except for yesterday, but that was not his fault. The point I'm trying to make here is that David and Sven have been acting out with a classic sessional professor attitude. They clearly have other obligations that are drawing their time and attention away from us, which brings me to my most important point. Folks, are we not so often told that we are the future? Are we not society's most important asset? The point of a professor is that they are past their prime and must now transfer their skills to us. For the amount of money I'm paying for my education, I don't want to be vying for the attention of a movie star dating celebrity lawyer. I want an experienced academic to use all of their time and energy to make me as bright and talented as they can be. Quite frankly, I just don't think the sessional professors realize my potential as much as they could. Which brings us to the matter of tenured professors. Wow. You might say they put the pro in professor, but I don't know who would, because that was a terrible joke. They have been approved and acclaimed by a variety of boards. They wear glasses. Most of them have fantastic accents. They are mature, or shall we say, experienced. I could go on ad nauseum, but allow me to summarize by asking if you would rather be listening to someone who still gets ID'd at the LCDO, or by someone whose old-world British pomp and dulcet tones could very well have been the inspiration behind Mr. Darcy. Yes, ladies, I'm talking about Browning.